Awake from the dream of the picture you painted. If you want it, proclaim it. Say it loud and proclaim it. Make sure you leave with something more than you came with. You will achieve, fueled by the will to attain it. So no more complaining, proclaim it.
Peace and blessings to everyone, and welcome to Proclaimit Radio. I'm your host, Sister Aqueelah Muhammad from Washington, D.C. Proclaimit Radio is about positivity, good news, growth, health, life, and love. We promote people who are proclaiming their space in this world and exuding greatness, the greatness that they possess in a positive light. We feature entrepreneurs, go-getters, and people who are representing their gifts to the world in a magnificent way. Today's episode was brought to us by TravelAlly.biz, your one-stop shop to vacations, hotel stays, flights, cruises, and much more. So today we have a very inspiring sister who has a passion for health and nutrition. She has a blog called Nature's Medicine Cabinet where she discusses topics that affect us today, topics such as what's happening with Monsanto and genetically modified organisms, the dangerous effects of fluoride, and much more. So without further ado, I would like to give Sister Shareefah Muhammad from Houston, Texas, about 30 seconds to introduce herself further, and we'll get started. So, assalamu alaikum, Sister Shareefah.
Wa alaikum salam, Sister Aqueelah. Thank you so much for loving us. I am doing fine by Allah's grace, and look, I'm just going to keep saying thank you, and thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So if you could just introduce yourself further. I know you're in school now. If you could just let everyone know who you are and what you do.
Okay, yes, ma'am. I am Sister Shareefah Muhammad. Currently, I am a student studying clinical nutrition. One of my goals in terms of doing that is to help to use the information to teach and train as well as explain to our people the importance of how to eat to live as it relates to how those foods affect our bodies, whether it's biochemically, biophysically, or any form of mathematical or scientific way. I want to stop there, but I guess I can mention my blog. I do write on my blog, Nature's Medicine Cabinet, and that's one avenue that I try to get some of that information out. So as I'm constantly learning, I love to constantly share, and I just leave it at that.
Yes, ma'am. And see, that is wonderful because we know that our knowledge is worth nothing unless we share it with the people around us so that it can improve and help their lives as well. So praise be to Allah. That is wonderful, ma'am. So just starting out, I wanted to ask you, what attracted you to How to Eat to Live, and why is the study so important to you?
That's a great question. I think for me in particular, coming to the Nation of Islam at a very young age for me as a teenager, I read How to Eat to Live, and after I read it, it was something that intrigued me in terms of wanting to practice it because initially I wanted to study traditional medicine. I wanted to become an MD, and I was pretty much on the path to becoming one. I had graduated from high school, and I was in college on my way into medical school, but then I realized after learning about how to eat to live and the effects that will produce from our bodies as opposed to my exposure to traditional medicine, that really was not quite the route I wanted to go. And at that time, there wasn't much that I knew about holistic medicine, but I decided I would try to find out about it. So I kind of turned my back to the traditional practice to a degree. And once I did that, studying and even just going through some of my own personal experiences, like I said, as a teenager, once I started practicing how to eat to live, one of the things that I overcame were allergies, which, of course, nowadays, especially where I live in the South, is becoming very, very prevalent, and the stages of it are worsening around people that I know personally. But for someone who had allergies from childhood all the way up to that point to where I started practicing one meal a day and then no longer having them, that alone convinced me that there was more to how to eat to live, and not only that, to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Right, yes, ma'am. And see, that is really, really powerful because a lot of times we're told that allergies are genetic. They're hereditary. It's not something that you can just get over, but we're seeing with the different ways that we've been taught to eat that a lot of these things can be cured. And for our audience members who might not know a lot about how to eat to live, what does it consist of? Like, what does that actually mean?
How to eat to live in particular. I would like to use it as a backdrop, because anything that we do, we know it has a connection to God Himself. In the Holy Quran, there is a verse in Surah 3. It's verse 48. And I'm not going to read the entire verse, but there's a part there where it speaks about how when the messenger to the children of Israel comes amongst us, one of the things that he would do is he would inform us of what we should eat and what we should store in our houses. And so bringing that up, that kind of is the backdrop to what How to Eat to Live is about. Because on the front cover of the book, for those who may not have read it, when you get a chance to look at it, it says, from God in person, Master Muhammad. The Elijah Muhammad who has taught us that he was taught directly from God face to face. So if he is taught directly from God face to face, we know that the information contained in that book, that is the antidote, that is the cure of all cures to everything that we suffer from. Now, going into the book, the most critical component of it that the messenger goes over and over with us again and again to hopefully get us to understand is that one meal a day is best if we want to not suffer from pretty much any illness that we see people suffering from today.
All right, yes, ma'am. So in that study, I know because you're very excited about it that you've probably told people, just people that you know, what you're doing and that you're eating one meal a day. So what kind of things have you run into? Because I know for me personally, I've had people say, eating one meal a day, you're going to die, that's crazy. So what kind of things have you run into with that? Because I know a lot of people, if they've never heard of that before, they feel like, you're going to kill yourself, you're going to die, you're supposed to eat 6 times a day. So what kind of things do you hear and what kind of things do you say?
Oh, yes, man, absolutely. You're right. I've heard that one many times. Like, I'm not going to live. I'm not going to make it. I get headaches when I don't eat. I get stomach aches. I mean, just about any excuse you could think of, people come up with. But in truth, even though the excuses, they are legit, because, living in a world where everything is contrary to what God has put forth, it makes sense. One thing in particular I thought about, beloved, before we got on the show, was how, in truth, our relationship to food is so distorted and so contrary. And I'll give you one quick example. I remember a sister shared with us one time about how she was at work, and 12 o'clock came around, and one of her coworkers went over to her, and she said, it's 12 o'clock, it's lunchtime. And the sister said to her, well, says who? She says, I'm not hungry. Who said, who told you it's lunchtime? And she was like, it's 12 o'clock. She said, so you mean to tell me just because it's 12 o'clock, that means you're going to force yourself, to eat? She said, are you even hungry? And she said the lady looked at her and didn't give a response. So she said her coworker, even though she ate her food that day, she didn't eat much of it, because in truth she was thinking about what the sister told her. How is it that you allow somebody to dictate to you or tell you just based off of a certain time, even if you're not hungry, you want to force yourself to eat? And so what we don't think about is when we're force-feeding ourselves, even though we're doing it out of social purposes or just because somebody set a certain time schedule for us, we're not looking at the consequences and the effects that it has on our bodies, because we're dying slowly. Time we really don't think about because we're such a fast-paced society, so we only look at the right here and the right now.
Right, yes, ma'am, and eating is a pleasurable experience, so it's like if you have never been heard or you've never heard of not eating just freely but only eating at certain times, you're like, why would I restrict myself from something so delicious? That's kind of crazy. And until you realize, I have people come to me all the time and they're like, what, you eat one meal a day? How can you do that? That doesn't make sense. But in truth, most times, a lot of people eat one meal a day, but they don't realize it, or they don't have a particular time that they do it. And the reason why is because our lives are very busy. As Americans, we go to work, we're working all day long. You have children, you got to pick them up from school, you got to help them with their homework, you got this and that going on. So you actually don't have time to eat all day long. you have time to maybe get one couple snacks and one really good meal, it's that. Sometimes people just snack all day. So when I explain it to them that way, they're kind of like, oh, that's kind of true. Like, I don't necessarily have 3 square meals a day, and I'm alive and well. I'm not suffering. And then when you see a lot of people who are not able to eat because they're suffering, like people who don't have the money to get what they need, and you see that people will live a long time without eating 3 square meals a day. So I love what you said, like our relationship with food is kind of what actually needs to change. We don't realize that we just eat just because it tastes good and it makes us feel good, but it's not necessary for us to keep on living. And I wanted to go right into the Navy bean zone. I wanted to ask you, what do you think the importance is of the Navy bean? Because that's mentioned over and over and over again, how to eat to live.
Okay. I think one way I would respond to that question, beloved, is in the Bible, in the book of Daniel, because I always love to share this, and I actually wrote an article surrounding it, Daniel, the first chapter. And in that chapter, it talks about how Daniel and those who were held captive with him were offered the king's meat. And they were telling the men who were offering them the king's meat that, we don't eat that because, if you give that to us, we're going to get sick and what have you. And they were like, well, so Daniel, he gave them a challenge. He said, I tell you what, let us eat our food, give us pulse to eat and water. And over a certain period of days, let's see, who's, and I'm paraphrasing, but let's see who's the healthier person. So they let David and those who were with him eat what they normally eat, which was pulse, and have their water to drink. Well, a pulse, from what I define with those who I covered this with, is an edible seed of various crops, which includes peas, beans, lentils, which are legumes. They're all types of beans. So what they were saying was Daniel's diet was a diet that consisted of a type of beans, and in particular, the Navy bean. And so when the men came back and looked at them based on the diet they were eating, they had better clarity of thought. They were stronger. They had more strength. So what it showed was that the diet of Daniel was much more superior than the diet of the king. And if we translate that to today, the diet that the Aqueelah Muhammad has given us and how to eat to live, the Navy bean is superior to the American diet that is being consumed by the majority of the people who live in this country, of course, which consists of meat and things like that. But it's that Navy bean, like you said, that the messenger consistently talks about that provides not only the basic core nutrients, which are the carbohydrates, the protein, low in fat, but it also has a wide variety of vitamins and minerals that all work together that helps to eliminate so many diseases that people suffer from that they don't even know because we're not learning about the importance of how food affects our body.
And see, that is really powerful. I just remember being a small child, and I remember asking my mom, what am I supposed to eat? I just eat what you give me. And I remember she was kind of laughing, and she was teaching me, like, the ways to cook and things like that. But I always thought that was so weird that we don't have, starting in elementary school, we don't have classes on nutrition and what you need to eat to stay alive. You just kind of eat. It's like everything in this world today is a mystery. We don't actually know what we need to eat to maintain a healthy lifestyle. We don't know what we need to eat if we have a headache or if we have a stomach ache. We just go to the doctor and get some pills to try to get better. And you had mentioned something about diseases and things. So I wanted to ask you, do you know of anything that has been cured? Like I know you mentioned allergies earlier, how you got rid of your allergies or some of your allergies because of eating one meal a day. Do you know of any diseases or anything that have been cured from your knowledge of because of how to eat to live?
I would, personally, in terms of knowing individuals, I could definitely vouch for, some people that I've come across who may have had, like, diabetes in particular, by changing their diet, practicing how to eat to live, the blood sugar went away. That went away, but, it went down, and they never dealt with symptoms of diabetes again. So, technically, we would say it was cured. And the reason I use the word technically, because in this society, they make the word cure sound like it's so obscure that you can't really cure much of anything, whether it's with medication or naturally. But if you have had an ailment that has completely gone away, then you're cured. So, yes, ma'am, I have come across definitely overcome diabetes as a result of practicing how to eat to live. I'm trying to think in particular, well, now autoimmune diseases in particular, I've had a friend who, once she started practicing how to eat to live, even though her ailments didn't go away completely, I mean, the symptoms that she suffered from were reduced so significantly that, I mean, it changed her life, because she was like, for over 5 years, I've never, slept a full night because I'm so used to waking up with pain, and now I don't even know what it's like to just sleep a full night. And so she was able to start sleeping throughout the night, and that was something strange to her because that was not her way of life. So I have definitely come across people who, by practicing how to eat to live, it has definitely changed their way of life by eliminating pain and inflammation, and things like that they thought that was something they had to live with for the rest of their lives until they died.
Oh, yes, ma'am. And see, what you said right there, that is so, so, so powerful. There's so many things, and I just, personally, I was thinking about what happened to me. I didn't realize that I was suffering from anemia, and what that is the lack of not having enough iron in your blood, and I was getting these really severe migraine headaches. And I remember I went to my doctor, just like you said, and I was saying to her, like, how do I get rid of these migraines? Because at the time, that's what we thought that it just was, that I was just getting headaches. And my doctor told me, oh, everybody gets migraines. You're going to have them for the rest of your life. Just take the medicine when you have them. And to me, that just was not good enough. It's like, you're a doctor, how can you tell me that this is something that's just going to happen to me for the rest of my life, and I just have to deal with it, that it happens to millions of Americans, and it's just what happens. And to me, when I finally found out what was really wrong, that I was dealing with anemia, and I started really getting back onto the navy beans because they have so much iron in them, and my headaches went away, I was drinking more water, and I don't have that issue anymore. But if I were to just listen to the doctor who didn't know anything about health and nutrition, well, I'm not going to say health, but didn't know anything about nutrition as just a regular medical doctor, she didn't help me to get better. And going back to the mystery thing, we have to really be able to take back our health into our own hands. So I just thought that was really powerful, that we suffer through these things. We just think, oh, this is just normal. I'm just going to have headaches, or I'm just going to have pain. And just from the people that I've seen with different diseases, especially diabetes, looking at restricted caloric intake diets, like going down to 600 calories a day, which is 1 meal a day, basically, taking your calories down. Yeah, like I thought that was so interesting that the scientist, it was a European scientist who was talking about restricted caloric intake diets, which is the same thing as 1 meal a day, and it was actually eliminating people's high blood pressure, their diabetes, and everything. And I just think that is so amazing. But I think it's really cool, like, for instance, you're studying these different things so we can come at the people with the scientific terms instead of just telling them, oh, you just need to get on the messenger's program. But there's actually science behind what it is that we've been taught to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you, but let you keep going.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to know, though, too, I noticed you're studying nutrition, so have you been able to learn anything interesting that you found about food combining?
You said about food combining?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, absolutely, yes, ma'am, for sure. In particular, like the messenger teaches us, since we're focusing on the navy bean, that we shouldn't mix meat with our navy beans. And one of the reasons that we should not do that, of course, is one, it skyrockets the protein content, but also, too, it adds an inordinate amount of fat to the navy bean. And then, too, when you look at it from a biochemical aspect, depending on how the meat is prepared that you're putting in it, what could happen is you can increase the the interaction that food would have in the body in terms of what we call, a lot of people say, oh, I have I don't eat fried food, I don't eat this because of all these free radicals. Well, it would increase certain content like free radicals, which is a substance that makes cells break down faster in our body. So it's really like you're putting yourself in a position where you're going to cause the body to attack itself because you're putting in the wrong combination at the wrong time. And there are other things, too, that when we mix that can cause those what we call adverse reactions. Another aspect, too, of food combining, like, you talked about how the navy bean has a high iron content as it relates to, the 24 grams? I'm trying to get the number correct this year, or 25%.
Yes.
Foods that, especially vegetables, that have a good iron content is very critical that we watch what we mix with that because sometimes what can happen is even though the food may have a good iron content, but because you're eating something that's conflicting with it, your body won't absorb the iron. Like, for example, phytic acid prevents or for lack of a better term, what's the word I'm looking for? Not contest, but competes. It competes with iron. So if you're eating something like, say, a spinach or another food that's high in that while you're eating navy beans at the same time, then it will compete with that iron so your body won't absorb as much. And so, yes, food combining, like you mentioned, is so important to know and understand. But the other thing I want to make clear when it comes to food combining, when I'm saying eating navy bean and then having your spinach, you can still have that at the same meal, but what you want to do is at least leave a gap in between the introduction of the two foods. You don't want to eat them, at that same time. Like, say you may have your bean soup, and then maybe half an hour later as you're digesting that and eating maybe your salad or something, then you can eat your spinach as, as a part of your main course. But you don't want to eat them sitting there at that same time within that same time frame right there at that moment as you're eating your soup. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. I'm
okay.
Definitely. It makes a lot of sense, and it makes me think about how we, when we're eating, quote unquote, properly, and we have sections, we have courses that we eat. That there's actually a break in between the courses. So that is actually really fascinating that you said that, because I know I had never thought about that. It looks like we have a question though, so I'm going to go ahead and allow this person to ask their question. The last four digits of your number are 9061. So you can go ahead and answer or ask your question. So, caller, you can now answer your question. Okay. Well, I don't know if the person still has asked the question, but we'll just continue on. But no, I do think that that's something that we have to realize is very important, that we know what it is that we're putting in our bodies and we don't just eat everything that's on our plate. I know in How to Eat to Live it was mentioned that one or two good things is good for you, and you don't necessarily have to eat everything that's good at one time. And I thought that was really, really interesting as well. And I actually wanted to ask you, so when you're preparing your navy beans, how do you prepare them?
Okay, as you're referring to the navy beans for navy bean soup, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, of course, the first thing we're taught is to soak the navy beans. And one of the main reasons that we soak the beans is because any natural food that grows in nature is going to have some type of substances on it to protect it from nature. Of course, we know that insects and what have you do like to get to plants, but they still have their own protective barriers. And so when we soak the navy beans, some of those substances that we are removing come out in the water, or that, once we rinse them off. So in the soaking process, navy beans do have a substance called phytic acid as well. But when you soak navy beans, what it does is it minimizes the amount of phytic acid on the navy beans. And phytic acid is a substance that once we ingest it, sometimes it gives us gas. So, of course, we know that soaking the navy bean is a very good thing to do. But the thing about the phytic acid and other substances that give us gas from the navy beans is not that we make the gas. It's the good bacteria in our body that consumes that makes the gas, and that's the byproduct, of what we call a symbiotic, which means a really good relationship where nobody is hurt but everybody gets a benefit. That's the byproduct of that relationship. And you want to have that type of bacteria in your digestive system so that it can take care of any type of, unnatural bacteria or yeast or fungus that gets in there to get it out. So after soaking the navy beans overnight, and normally for every pound of beans that you soak, you should have at least, I'm not going to try to give the exact numbers, but you should have at least a certain quantity of water. Let's put it that way, because I don't want to give a misinformation at this very moment. And when you let it soak overnight, that helps reduce the possibility of having too much gas in the beans. So the next day, once I've soaked the beans, I normally switch out my water, put some fresh water in, and I cook my beans. And, of course, when you're cooking your beans in that process, it still makes foam, which are those substances from the beans that will produce gas. So we're taught to take that foam off, because if you let the foam stay, what's going to happen is it's going to dissolve into the water. And once it dissolves into the water, it becomes a part of your soup, which, as a result, gives you gas. So we don't want that. Another thing people can do, especially if they have issues, because a lot of people do say, beans give me gas. We want to go get some Beano. We don't need no Beano. Get you some bay leaves. Bay leaves are a natural, they're a natural plant that grows. You can get them at a Whole Food store. You can grow them yourself. You put a few of those in your beans as you're cooking them, and it too helps to relieve and alleviate the gas that may still be present in the soup. Now the messenger teaches us, because I make my navy bean soup several different ways pending. I love the recipe that is in the cookbook that was done by, I believe it's not, Sister Maria Farrakhan. I like to use that recipe a lot. It uses several ingredients, several different vegetables. But the Aqueelah Muhammad teaches us how to eat to live as well, that we can always eat our navy beans in a very simplistic way, which is just with a little salt, a little olive oil, and you're good to go. Another more common recipe that I eat and we use here in our city are fresh garlic and fresh onion, and your little seasoned salt and a little olive oil, and you're good to go as well.
Yes, ma'am. And so about how long does it take for you to make your? I mean, as far as like the entire process from start to finish, from soaking them.
Okay. Well, from soaking them, of course, soaking them overnight, that's about that 8 hours. Get up in the morning and actually put them on and cook them. Normally, it takes me about 2 hours to cook mine, but that's because I don't normally. Like, I may start off cooking them on high, but once I bring it to a boil, I turn it down, which doesn't take that long. And then I just pretty much cook it on medium heat. Let's see, if a person has a gas stove, food cooks quicker on gas than it does on electric. So you may be able to cut down a good 15, 20 minutes on a gas stove than you versus an electric stove. So I would say overall it takes, with the soaking, 10 hours, because that's 2 to cook and that 8 to soak.
Okay, yeah. So you probably make them in advance and so you can have it ready?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And also, too, for those who feel that they may not have the time to cook them in that manner that we may do on the stove, a crock pot works. I've had friends of mine who have, because they work, they would, do the soaking and everything, and when they got up that morning, put their beans in the crock pot, put it on low. By the time they're back from whether it's work or whatever they had to do that day, the beans are done. So, there are definitely other ways to eliminate the excuse for not having the time to prepare navy beans.
Yes, ma'am. Praise be to Allah. Definitely good to hear that there are definitely different ways to do it, because I know for me at first when I was learning to do it, I was soaking my beans for so many days because I didn't know about the bay leaves, though. So praise be to Allah. You can use that as well to help to get rid of that, because I know that's one thing that when I tell people that they should eat bean soup, like it makes a difference, they're like, no, because it causes me pain. But if we can know these little things like adding bay leaves and these different things that we have naturally, then we can produce a soup that will be agreeable to everyone's stomach, and then we can enjoy the health benefits of it as well. It looks like we have another caller, and I'll go ahead and let you ask your question. So the last 4 digits of the number are 007, so you're live. You could just introduce yourself and where you're from and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Karima from Bronx, New York. I was just wanting to add a soaking method because I'm a homeschooling mom of 7 kids, and I never have time for anything but always get bean soup on the table. And the way that I do it is, you got to also explain to them it's depending on your beans. Sometimes the harvest is so bad you have to soak it overnight. But if you get some decent beans and you don't look too grayish in the bag, you can actually do the 1-hour soaking method. And the way that is that I clean my beans, then I soak it plain with no seasoning or nothing. Meaning boil it for an hour. Boil it once it gets boiled. I literally strain it, and I know a lot of people say, well, you're taking the nutrients and stuff out of it, but if you want to get it on quick, that's the way that I do it too. And I just reboil it. So I'm literally boiling it twice, and it comes out super soft. But then again, it also depends on the bean harvest. Some bean harvests that are heirloom beans, and they're free of pesticide. I mean, it takes an hour to cook. They cook very nice and soft within an hour. And some, like some Goyas and jackrabbits, well, you may have to soak overnight or do the 1-hour boiling method, And I usually get my beans cooked out in an hour and a half.
Right, yes, ma'am.
And they also have a pot called the Easy Bean Cooker. That thing will cook in 15 minutes. A bag of navy beans in 15 minutes.
Wow.
An Easy Bean Cooker for only $100. Just is easybeancooker.com. I kid you not. It will cook your beans in 15 minutes, nice and soft. All you got to do is clean them, put them in, and it's done.
Wow. I haven't heard that device before. Praise be to Allah.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Sister Karima, for calling in all the way from Bronx, New York, and sharing with us, because that is something I'm definitely going to look into as well, because yes, ma'am.
People are busy. And that's very helpful, trust me.
Yes, ma'am. And, again, thank you for calling in as well. And Sister Shareefah was there as well. So do you have any other things? Because I know sometimes people are like, I don't want to eat navy beans every day. So I know for me I had to come up with a couple of different ways to make them, and I was wondering if you had any other things that you did with beans just so that you could get after soaking them, of course, just creating different things that you could do.
Absolutely. Like I said, the navy bean, it's a universal food all by itself. I remember here in Houston, we the Vanguard class once had a Everything Navy event where we had all these dishes that we made from navy beans, and some of the different types that can be made are like a navy bean 7-layer dip. We've had navy bean patties, of course, where navy beans will be the main source as opposed to, of course, we're taught we shouldn't eat soy. So this is a good alternative to use so people don't have to use soy to make veggie patties. Also, navy bean chimichangas. We have a cookbook here in Houston that was called How to Eat to Live 1,000 Years, and a few of those recipes were in there. Navy bean chimichanga. We know we had a brother on the East Coast, Brother Don, I believe his name, who makes the navy bean chips. There's navy bean quesadillas. I mean, just about anything you could use meat for, you could actually use a navy bean for. Let's just put it that way. Look, let me even get into this. I'm getting a little excited. Our student captain here will make navy bean cupcakes with navy bean icing. And, oh, my gosh, you talk about delicious. I think the sister in Chicago does it as well. So, but like I said, usually we know the bean pot, but the navy bean can be used for dessert. It can be used for dinner. It's universal.
Yes, ma'am. And see, that is really, really true. I was just thinking one time I was like, I want the protein, but I don't want something like that. So it caused me to try something different. The great thing about the navy bean is it has such a light flavor. Like you said, you can do anything with it. I remember I made navy bean smoothies, and it was so good. You just add the fruit, And it was delicious. I was like, oh, well, I mean, they should make a bean store and just have navy beans be the featured item, and then whatever you want, we can make it out of navy beans. So I always thought that was really, really cool and amazing because of the light flavor that it has. And so I wanted to ask you, though, so for anyone who's trying to make different steps to change their diet, to get rid of the fried foods and different things like that, it can kind of seem overwhelming. But I know that you're studying nutrition, so I wanted to ask you, what are, for someone who wants to make a change and wants to do something different, maybe try out navy beans, what would you suggest the steps they take to do it so it doesn't seem overwhelming to just throw everything out and start again? What would you suggest?
Oh, well, depending on where they're coming from, because, how to eat to live, Aqueelah Muhammad, he gives us a wide array of foods that we can choose from to eat. He gives us fruits and vegetables, and there's so many vegetables out there that we are allowed to eat outside of the ones that he tells us aren't good for us. And just about every fruit that's available we have access to. And then even when it comes to the meat, he tells us that no meat is good for us. However, for those who may, want to go through a weaning process, certain meats that they, could eat. So my suggestion would be coming from what the messenger teaches us. If someone chooses to, start weaning themselves off of meat, start, like he said, the baby pigeon, the squab, that's the best one to eat if someone wants to still eat chicken. Because, of course, in this day and time as well, so many things have happened with our food. Like in Part 38 of the Time, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan weighs heavily on the GMOs in our food and the effects that it has on our body and why it's important for us to own our own land. So I would suggest, based off of what the message teaches us, squab is great. Some of the things I've learned in my courses I've taken up to this point, that if someone does want to eat, like chicken itself, if you're going to eat chicken, the best chicken to eat will be chicken that is eating like organic, grass, not feed. Because if the chickens are, I'm saying grass, but they're eating a normal vegetable diet, if they're eating an organic vegetable diet, which I'm not sure if chickens eat grass, I'm a vegetarian, but whatever they're eating needs to be organic. And if it's organic, what it does is it increases the amount of what we call good fats, which are omega-3s, as opposed to overwhelming the body with what are called omega-6. Because even though omega-3s and omega-6s are fats that we need in our body, most of us have too much omega-6. And most of the animals that are being fed, especially the ones that are being fed GMO feed and just non-organic food, their meat content that we're consuming is high in omega-6. And what I've learned from my pain and inflammation course is that because we have a high content of omega-6 in our bodies from the meat that we're eating, that is leading to a high prevalence of inflammation and diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis and many others. So if you're going to eat meat, it needs to be meat or chicken or beef that is consuming organic, natural, grass, plant food that they should be eating. But like I said, the message teaches us that really no meat is good for us. Moving beyond meat, when it comes to vegetables, especially our people who are so used to eating, the slave diet, the collard greens, the sweet potatoes, if you could think of another soul food, chime in for me, the black-eyed peas, I'm thinking of all these different things. But excellent substitutes for sweet potatoes and butternut squash. So it's not like you're giving up a food you may just love dearly that's killing you softly, but you can automatically replace it with something that tastes just as great, and not only that, gives you more of a health benefit. For like your collard greens, your kale, you can substitute with spinach and things of that nature. Your black-eyed peas, I've come across some people who can make a mean bean-type recipe that's similar to black-eyed peas using a navy bean. So there are many different ways. It's just coming across the right people that can show them and guide them on how to make that transition, and they won't even realize they're missing anything.
Yes, ma'am, and that's the thing. I feel like a lot of it when you're trying to change your diet is really about also shifting your paradigm because you're making a choice to eat something better, but also just knowing how to, well, I would say how to be a vegetarian. Like it's about knowing the proper way to season something because if we realize people all over the world, we basically eat the same kinds of foods. It's just that we have different spices and seasons. So when you go to a Thai restaurant or a Mexican restaurant, I mean, it's still vegetables or it's still chicken if you're eating meat and you're eating chicken, but it's seasoned differently. So that's what makes it taste like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And if we learn and gain information on how to season foods in a different way, then we can enjoy them as well. But I heard you mention something about GMOs, and I know you wrote an article about Monsanto. I wanted to know if you could give our audience any information about that, like why should they care about genetically modified organisms? What is that? Why is that something that we should be concerned about?
Okay, that's a great question, because it's that word GMO is slowly becoming more and more popular amongst people, and people are now starting to ask, well, what is that? Genetically modified foods are foods that what they've done now is they've taken the seeds and they've rearranged the DNA in the seed. So when the food grows, even though it looks like something we used to eat, really internally it's not the food that we used to eat. It's just the appearance. And since they're damaging or changing the DNA in the food and we are what we eat, then that means that food that we're eating that has been changed is causing a change in us. And not just by us gaining weight. It's changing us on the structural, on the cellular level, meaning our DNA too is being affected. So to give people a better understanding of what that means is you may come across somebody who, let's say, for example, may have had inflammatory cancer, some type of inflammatory cancer. But the interesting point about it is the person who has this inflammatory cancer, whether it's breast cancer, liver, what have you, you look down that family line and you see that there's no trace of family history of it. So the question becomes, well, where did that come from? Well, when we start to attack the DNA, the very core of our physical being, then anything is fair game. Anybody can get any type of ailment, even if it's not in your family history, because now you're introducing into your body something that's starting to change the very genetic structure of yourself.
Right, yes, ma'am. And I don't know if you, man, it's so powerful and it's so big. I know for me, just looking at different things that specifically Monsanto, but not exclusively Monsanto and other companies are doing to the seeds that are affecting the farmers. And it seems like the best thing to do is to get organic food, but where can people find organic foods? Where would you suggest that they look for those?
Okay, the best place is to grow it yourself. Let's start there. But if you're not growing it yourself, a second best is to find somebody you know that's growing food themselves, which could lead to like small farmers markets, or like co-ops. Certain co-ops, they're able to point out places where people are actually growing their own food locally. So you always try to start locally, very close, very small. The larger you have to go out, the more likely you're going to come across some type of, I guess you want to use the word contamination. But if you cannot find a local farmer or local grower, then, of course, if you go to a grocery store, which would be, in this case, the last resort if that's what you have to do, then, of course, they have a lot of stores. Now, if in the lower economic areas, in the hood areas, they more than likely don't have those type of spaces because most of our areas where we live, they have food deserts. But if you can find a grocery store that has an organic section or a health and wellness section, then you can find organic produce in those stores. I am familiar, though, that Walmart is now starting to try and carry organic food. But I'm not quick to trust, and I'm not quick to recommend that people trust it just because, Walmart has put it in their store. Because, remember, this is a big commercial brand. So that's why it's always best to go local. But if you are looking for something organic, than you would where it's labeled organic, and pray that what you're getting is what they say it is.
No, yes, ma'am, and that is the thing. It can be kind of daunting, like really interesting to try to figure out all of the things that are going on. And I just wanted to, as we start to begin to come to a close, I wanted to ask about, I know the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was talking about on the time it must be done that famine is coming to the United States, and we need to be canning, we need to be storing, and I wanted to ask you if you had any suggestions of things that you know of that can be stored and kept so that we have food in a time of there not being food.
Well, okay, yes, ma'am. Well, of course, the Navy bean can be stored. You know, we've been taught how to properly can our Navy bean, how to cook them and to can them so that we can have that, you know, easy access to that. Fruit, pretty much any fruit, if you could dry them. They have those little devices that dry the fruit, takes that moisture out, and your fruit will last for, you know, a good while. I can't give you the time limit on that because I know that's something the sister, I want to say his name, Sister Karima, who deals with disaster preparedness, is much better equipped to share than I am. But the Navy bean, because we can can it, definitely do that. Fruits, if you can cut them and dry them and store them properly, you could do that. Some people have a tendency to go out and buy certain foods that last 3 or 6 months because there are companies that provide rations. So if someone wants to purchase rations, they could do that. But, you know, because we're focusing primarily on that Navy bean, that's the way to go. It definitely is the way to go. And then, too, you know, going back to the GMO piece you mentioned and also tying it into the famine that's coming our way, 1 meal a day is so critical for us to practice for several reasons. One, of course, because, you know, when the famine does come, we won't be in a panic because we're not able to constantly eat. We've already disciplined ourselves, so, you know, there won't be an emotional override, and it won't cause us to act in ways that are harmful not only to others but to ourselves. And even with the GMO food, even knowing how to eat to live, Aqueelah Muhammad teaches us that, you know, 1 meal a day and eat the best of food. He focuses more so on that one meal than the actual food because he said even if you're eating, you know, foods other than are the best, just the fact that you're putting that gap in between them is more important because it's helping to get those toxins out of your body. So that 1 meal a day is critical both for self-preservation and even in times of famine.
Right, yes, ma'am, and that is definitely true because a lot of times we realize that really the reason why we were eating anyway, like you said earlier in the show, is not because you were hungry. It's because we were told that it's time to eat. So in a situation where you don't have food, sometimes that creates a panic, and that we know in any situation will make the situation way worse than it actually is and that it ever had to be. And it looks like we have another caller. The last 4 digits of the number are 0774, so you are now live. And if you would just state your name and where you're from, and we would be happy to take your call. So again, the last 4 digits are 0774, and you're live. Again, state your question. Okay. Well, I seem to be having some technical difficulties. But yes, ma'am, it's definitely very, very true that we have to be, that is actually one of the things that I found is the most important thing that we have to realize that a lot of the issues and diseases that we have, they're not genetic. They're actually the reason why, like, for instance, if we have generations and generations of people with diabetes, it's not just because diabetes quote-unquote runs in your family, but generation after generation, you all have had the same diet and the same eating habits. So you continually eat the same way, so you have the same problems that your granddad had and your father had and now you have. And if we decide, okay, well, I don't eat like my great-grandfather and my grandfather and my dad, I'm choosing to eat differently, then you'll start to see the differences in our lives. And actually, really quickly, I wanted to go back, and if you wouldn't mind sharing, what kind of allergies did you get rid of when you started eating 1 meal a day?
I had, wow, that's the best way for me to put it. Like they called it childhood allergies. I had a lot of congestion and mucus. So, like, when I was asleep at night, I slept with face towels because I was constantly blowing my nose all night because it would just come out all night. And that was every night. That wasn't like when the seasons changed. So it was it was something that was a part of my life that I had thought was normal. I thought people slept with face towels at night because I thought everybody sneezed and had mucus and stuff coming out of their noses and stuff because that was my way of life up until the point where I got older and realized, okay, this was not normal. So that was the type that I dealt with.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, and then, you just made me think of another point, too. I was allergic to cats and dogs. And also, I could not walk through a perfume department in any store because if I did, I would just constantly sneeze. To the point to where it's like I was having sneeze attacks. It just would not stop. It was just consistent until I was able to get some fresh air.
It's really, really amazing just to see the different things that happen to us when we start doing. It's like, I know for me, like I haven't done a thorough study about how to eat to live like I really want to, and like inshallah I will be able to experience. But I know for me, one thing that I know to be true is that when you submit to doing 1 meal a day, it's like anytime you eat something that is disagreeable to your body, and all of our bodies are different, you know right away what it is that you ate. Like, for me, one thing I know, I really, really love broccoli. And I remember one time I must have used a season that was not, my body didn't like. And I knew the next day that it was the broccoli that made my stomach hurt and it wasn't anything else. And I know when I tell people that, they're like, what? Because, people always say, I have a headache or I have a stomach ache. It's like when you eat 1 meal a day, you can feel what's going on with your body. And I know that probably sounds like so foreign, but you literally know what happened that made your stomach hurt or made your head hurt, or I have a headache because I'm thirsty, not because I'm hungry and it's lunchtime, but because I'm actually thirsty. So I just thought, I know to me it's just really, really amazing all the things that you go through. And I also wanted to ask you before we leave and we come to a close, I wanted to ask you if you had anything else that you wanted to mention or if you wanted to talk about your blog at all before we go, just so if people want to follow like the information that you put out or anything like that, they can.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. And I was just listening to what you said. That's an excellent testimony, Sister Aqueelah, about how, practicing 1 meal a day helps to make us more self-aware. I never really thought about that. That's an excellent point. It makes us more self-aware, and you're absolutely right. You're able to listen and tune into your body and allow it to tell you, hey, I don't like this. Hey, that didn't work out for me. Okay, now remember the last time we had this, we got a little ill. So, so it helps to bear witness to what we should and what we shouldn't eat, and then, based off of each individual, what we're not able to eat at that moment. But I do, in closing, ma'am, I do want to make this one point that I feel is very significant that I've learned recently, and that is that 75% of our immune system is in the gut. It's in the digestive system. And I bring that up because when the messenger is pointing out mostly in How to Eat to Live why we should eat 1 meal a day is so we don't wear out our stomachs. When we're constantly eating, we are constantly suppressing the immune system, which is where the soldiers are. That's who fights these battles for us. That's where the sentinels are. That's who sends the signals out so that when something is introduced into our body that shouldn't be there, that's when our body goes to war with it. But because we're constantly silencing it, instead of fighting off the enemy that we're introducing from the foods we're eating, our bodies are starting to attack itself. So we're constantly battling ourselves because we're not giving the body a chance to rejuvenate, to regenerate and heal itself. Because when practicing one meal a day, what happens is not only are you allowing the immune system to build and strengthen itself, but you're also allowing the body to use that extra energy that's there to heal itself. And most of us do not connect or tie eating constantly or not eating to healing in the body. So 1 meal a day is so critical because that right there in and of itself, allowing that time frame and that gap in between is that window that the body is able to go to work and help to make us into new and better human beings. And I end on that.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. I'm so glad I asked you that because that is powerful, and that is really powerful that we have to remember that. I know in How to Eat to Live, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad talks about, he compares the stomach to a stone that can be destroyed or washed away by water dripping on it over a long period of time. Eventually, it'll put a crack in that stone and break it in half. And our stomach is similar to that. And like what you just said about having your immune system, it's mostly in our gut. It's in the good bacteria and fighting off things that come to attack us. And if we don't give it a chance to not digest food, but just protect us from whatever is going on. And, like, people have a lot of diseases. I know people have noticed, like, you always see somebody sneezing. There's always somebody coughing. So our body is constantly bombarded with foreign entities that your body has to fight off. And if you don't give your body a chance to fight it off, like, that is, oh, my goodness, that is so powerful, Sister Shareefah. So I definitely thank you for bringing that up and mentioning that. And as we come to the close, I did want to thank everyone who called in. I do apologize. We were having some technical difficulties with the callers, so inshallah we will have that fixed for the next show. But if you did have a question, you can write it on our page, and I'll make sure that it gets to Sister Shareefah, or if we have a part 2 as well, that we get your questions answered. I did want to apologize for that. And but I did want to thank everyone for tweeting, everyone for calling in, and definitely I wanted to thank you, Sister Shareefah, for sharing with us what you have learned. And in closing, I just wanted to mention again that this episode of Proclaimit Radio was brought to us by TravelAlly.biz, your one-stop shop for affordable cruises, passports, and hotel stays. And it's TravelAlly.biz, and I wanted to leave you all with this. If self-improvement is the basis for community development, then all of the solutions to our community issues are within each of us. So I wanted to tell everyone that they should proclaim their space today, and I wanted to leave everyone in the greeting words of peace and paradise of Assalamu alaikum.
Awake from the dream of the picture you painted. If you want it, proclaim.